There is a psychological paradox that most people discover only after making the same mistake repeatedly. The more attention you give someone, the less they may feel compelled to think about you. You believe that constant presence will make you important. You answer immediately, you initiate every conversation, you show interest before it has been earned, and you make yourself available whenever they want you. Yet slowly, something unexpected happens. Your presence becomes normal, your attention becomes expected, and what was once interesting becomes ordinary. Then you become quiet. You stop initiating every conversation. You stop reacting to every small provocation. You stop rushing to prove that you care. You do not disappear to punish anyone. You simply withdraw your attention and return it to yourself. Now watch what happens inside the other person's mind. At first, there is uncertainty. They were accustomed to receiving your attention. And suddenly, the pattern has changed. The human mind is extremely sensitive to changes in patterns. When something predictable becomes unpredictable, we notice it. The person may look at their phone more often. They may wonder why you have not contacted them. They may revisit the last conversation. They may begin asking questions they never asked when you were constantly available. What changed? Did I do something? Are they losing interest? Are they talking to someone else? What are they thinking? This is the point most people misunderstand. Your silence has not necessarily made you more valuable by itself. It has created a gap, and the mind hates unexplained gaps. When information is missing, people naturally try to complete the picture, and that is where curiosity begins. When you were constantly giving attention, there was nothing to investigate. Your feelings were obvious. Your interest was obvious. Your availability was obvious. The other person never had to wonder where they stood because you continuously told them through your behavior. But when you stop providing every answer, their imagination becomes involved. They begin thinking about you without you asking them to. This is one of the most powerful effects of strategic absence. You can occupy someone's thoughts without occupying their space. But there is a dangerous misunderstanding here. If you hear this and decide to ignore everyone deliberately, you will miss the entire lesson. Artificial silence is easy to detect. Games create resistance. Delayed replies designed to create anxiety often reveal insecurity rather than confidence. The real principle is not ignore people so they chase you. The deeper principle is stop giving people unlimited access to your attention. There is a difference if someone knows that you will always respond, always explain, always chase, and always return after being dismissed. They have little reason to value your attention. It has become guaranteed. But when your attention becomes conditional, when it is given because you genuinely choose to give it, it becomes psychologically different. Scarcity changes perception. Consider something that is everywhere. You rarely think about it. Now imagine it suddenly becoming difficult to obtain. Your attention moves toward it automatically. You begin noticing details you previously ignored. You begin asking questions. You begin assigning greater significance to it. Human attention often follows the same pattern. What is constantly present fades into the background. What suddenly becomes absent moves into the foreground. This is why the most attractive form of ignoring is not hostility. It is indifference to unnecessary reactions. Someone insults you, you do not rush to defend your ego. Someone gives you a cold response, you do not immediately chase them for reassurance. Someone stops giving you attention. You do not beg for it back. Instead, you observe. You ask yourself whether their behavior deserves your energy. That pause is powerful because it removes the emotional reward other people may expect from provoking you. If someone can control your mood simply by ignoring you, criticizing you, or withholding approval, they possess influence over you. But when you can remain calm and continue with your life, you remove that leverage. And strangely, this emotional independence can make people more curious about you. Why are they not reacting? Why do they seem unaffected? Why are they so comfortable walking away? The mind begins searching for an explanation. This is where attraction can emerge, not because you have manipulated anyone, but because you have demonstrated something rare. You can exist without constantly needing external validation. Most people are broadcasting their need all the time. They want to be noticed. They want to be chosen. They want reassurance. They want immediate responses. They want proof that they matter. When you stop operating from that hunger, your behavior changes. You become slower to react, more selective with your words, and less desperate to maintain connections that are not reciprocal. People begin to sense that your attention has a price, not a monetary price, but a psychological one. They must earn access to it through genuine connection, respect, and mutual interest. And this creates another powerful effect: contrast. When someone has experienced your constant attention and then experiences your absence, they can suddenly recognize what they had previously taken for granted. Your silence creates a comparison between your presence and your absence. Before, they simply had your attention. Now they notice the lack of it. That difference can be psychologically louder than your presence ever was. But remember the most important rule: never make absence your identity. Do not become the person who ignores everyone because you are afraid of intimacy. Do not confuse emotional detachment with strength. Do not use silence to punish people. Do not disappear simply because you want someone to chase you. The strongest person does not need to manipulate attention. They simply stop wasting it. They have goals that demand concentration. They have standards. They have interests. They have a life that continues whether someone texts them or not. And that is ultimately why ignoring people can make you attractive, not because people magically desire what they cannot have, but because your ability to withdraw attention demonstrates that your emotional world does not depend entirely on theirs. You are no longer saying, "Please notice me." Your behavior says something far more powerful: I decide where my attention goes. And when you genuinely become the person who can walk away from unnecessary attention, unnecessary approval, and unnecessary drama, people begin to feel the difference between someone who wants to be valued and someone who already knows their own value. There is another uncomfortable law of human psychology. The harder you try to make someone value you, the more you can convince them that you need their approval. You may think that constant messages, endless compliments, immediate replies, and repeated attempts to gain someone's attention are signs of confidence. But beneath these actions, another message can be communicated. Your response determines how I feel about myself, and people can sense that the moment someone realizes that you desperately need their attention, the balance between you changes. They no longer have to wonder whether you want them. They already know. They no longer have to invest much effort because you are doing most of the pursuing. You are moving toward them while they remain still. This is why chasing so often creates the opposite of what you intended. Imagine someone who becomes increasingly distant. Most people respond by moving closer. They send another message, then another. They ask what is wrong. They explain themselves. They try harder to be interesting, kinder, more available, more impressive. But every additional effort can make the situation worse because the other person receives a powerful signal. I can pull away and they will come running. Now compare that with someone who notices the distance and simply steps back. No dramatic announcement, no angry speech, no attempt to make the other person jealous. They simply stop chasing. Suddenly, the pattern changes. The person who is accustomed to being pursued is now facing uncertainty. They may begin wondering why the attention disappeared. They may question whether they misjudged the relationship. They may become curious about what changed. This is not because humans automatically desire everything they cannot have. It is because the psychological balance has changed. When you chase someone, you make them the prize and yourself the applicant. When you stop chasing, you restore equality. And equality is far more attractive than desperation. There is a subtle distinction between showing interest and seeking validation. Showing interest says, I enjoy your presence. Seeking validation says, I need your response to feel valuable. The first is healthy. The second gives another person unnecessary control over your emotional state. This is why emotional independence matters so much. You can want someone without needing them. You can admire someone without worshiping them. You can pursue a relationship without abandoning your dignity. And you can walk away without turning the experience into a personal defeat. That last ability is particularly powerful because it changes how you behave. When you know you can leave, you stop negotiating against yourself. You stop accepting disrespect simply because you fear losing someone. You stop sending messages simply because silence makes you uncomfortable. You stop explaining your value to someone who has already decided not to recognize it. And strangely enough, this is often when people begin to recognize your value, because attraction is influenced not only by what you give, but by what your behavior reveals about you. If you are willing to sacrifice your standards simply to keep someone interested, you reveal that keeping them matters more to you than keeping your self-respect. But if you can tolerate their absence, you reveal something entirely different. You have an internal center. Your life does not collapse when someone withdraws. Your identity is not dependent on being chosen. Your attention is not begging to be returned. This does not mean you should become emotionally unavailable. That is another form of fear disguised as strength. The goal is not to feel nothing. The goal is to feel deeply without allowing emotion to dictate every action. If you care, show it. If you want someone, express your interest. But once you have made your position clear, allow the other person to make theirs. Do not keep knocking on a door that has already been closed. Because every time you continue pursuing someone who is clearly withdrawing, you teach them that your boundaries have no consequences. You are telling them that they can give less and receive the same amount from you. Eventually, resentment appears. You feel that you are giving everything while receiving little. They feel no urgency because you have removed the necessity for them to contribute. The solution is not to demand more. The solution is to stop overgiving. Let reciprocity reveal itself. If someone wants your presence, they should move toward you too. If they value your conversation, they should participate in it. If they want a relationship, their actions should gradually make that intention visible. This is where ignoring becomes psychologically powerful in a completely different way. You are not ignoring the person as punishment. You are ignoring the temptation to chase what is not being freely offered. You are refusing to turn attraction into a negotiation. And when you stop chasing, you also give the other person something they could never experience while you were constantly pursuing them. The opportunity to miss you. Absence gives people a chance to compare. They remember your conversations. They remember your presence. They notice the silence where your attention used to be. And if there was genuine value in the connection, they may begin moving toward you on their own. If they do not, you have still gained something important. You have discovered the truth, because chasing can keep an illusion alive. While stepping back reveals reality, the person who truly values you does not need to be dragged toward you. They may move slowly, they may have imperfections, but there will be movement from their side. So stop trying to convince someone to value what they continually refuse to value. Give your attention where it is returned, your energy where it is respected, and your presence where it is genuinely wanted. The moment you stop chasing approval, you stop handing other people the power to define your worth, and that is when your presence begins to carry real weight. When you stop trying to control every conversation, something interesting begins to happen. Other people start revealing themselves. Most people are uncomfortable with silence because silence creates uncertainty. When you constantly speak, explain, reassure, and fill every empty moment, you protect the other person from having to reveal what is actually happening inside them. You give them answers before they have even asked the questions. But when you become quiet, the dynamic changes. A person who is accustomed to receiving your immediate reactions suddenly has to confront the absence of those reactions. They may begin wondering what you are thinking, what you noticed, whether you are disappointed, whether you have lost interest, or whether you simply have something more important occupying your attention. And because they do not know, their own mind begins producing explanations. This is where silence becomes psychologically powerful. Words give people information. Silence gives them a question. And the human mind has difficulty leaving a question unanswered. Consider a conversation in which someone says something provocative. Your instinct may be to defend yourself immediately. You explain what you meant. You justify your decision. You prove that they misunderstood you. You keep talking until you believe they finally understand. But notice what happens during all that explanation. You have revealed your position, your emotions, your fears, and sometimes even your weaknesses. The other person now has information, but imagine instead that you pause, you look at them, you do not become hostile, you simply refuse to react emotionally. Now they have less information. And that uncertainty can make them talk more. They may clarify what they meant. They may reveal why they said it. They may continue speaking because your silence makes them uncomfortable. In trying to fill the empty space, they may accidentally expose the very thing they were attempting to hide. This is one reason silence can be more revealing than interrogation. When you constantly question people, they become defensive. They prepare their answers. They construct explanations. But when you give them space, they often speak naturally. They begin explaining themselves without realizing how much they are revealing. The person who talks too much often believes they are controlling the conversation. In reality, they may be surrendering control. Every unnecessary sentence gives away another piece of information: your priorities, your insecurities, your expectations, your emotional triggers, your desire for approval, your fear of rejection, your impatience, your need to be understood. A more disciplined person does not feel compelled to reveal everything simply because silence has appeared. They can sit inside uncertainty. That ability is rare. Most people speak because they are afraid of what silence might mean. They think that if the conversation becomes quiet, they must repair it. If someone becomes distant, they must ask why. If someone misunderstands them, they must explain again and again. But sometimes the strongest response is simply to observe. Let people show you who they are. If someone becomes angry because you did not immediately agree with them, you have learned something. If someone keeps provoking you because they need a reaction, you have learned something. If someone becomes anxious when they cannot control your attention, you have learned something. If someone begins explaining themselves excessively when you remain calm, you have learned something. You did not force the truth out of them. You created enough space for them to reveal it. This is also why silence can increase attraction. When you constantly explain yourself, there is little room for imagination. People know exactly where you stand. But when you are comfortable allowing some things to remain unsaid, you create a degree of mystery. Mystery does not mean deception. It means you understand that not every thought needs to become public information. You do not need to announce every plan. You do not need to explain every emotion. You do not need to respond to every opinion. You do not need to prove that you are intelligent, confident, desirable, or important. Let your behavior carry some of the message. A person who is comfortable with silence often appears more composed because they are not desperately trying to control how others perceive them. And this brings us back to the deeper principle behind ignoring people. The purpose is not to make others uncomfortable. The purpose is to become comfortable yourself. When you can remain silent without feeling rejected, you become less dependent on external reactions. When you can walk away from a conversation without needing the final word, you become harder to manipulate. When you can allow someone to misunderstand you temporarily without rushing into panic, you gain emotional control. And emotional control changes the way people experience your presence. They begin to realize that your reactions cannot be easily purchased. They cannot simply provoke you into revealing everything. They cannot demand an explanation and expect immediate obedience. They must interact with you rather than control you. That is the deeper power of silence. You are not withholding words because you have nothing to say. You are withholding unnecessary words because you understand that every word has a cost. Sometimes the most revealing thing you can do is step back, become quiet, and watch what the other person does when you stop doing the talking for them. Give people enough silence, and eventually they will tell you what words never could. There is a kind of power that does not announce itself. It does not come from speaking louder, dominating every conversation, or making people afraid of you. It comes from becoming difficult to manipulate. When people cannot easily predict what will trigger you, what will win your approval, or what will make you chase them, they lose one of the simplest forms of control they have over you: your attention, Most people reveal their weaknesses through their reactions. Someone criticizes them, and they immediately defend themselves. Someone ignores them, and they send another message. Someone becomes distant, and they begin asking what they did wrong. Someone provokes them, and they become angry. The other person has barely moved, yet they have already controlled the emotional direction of the entire interaction. This is why emotional reactions are valuable information. When someone discovers exactly what makes you angry, jealous, insecure, or desperate, they have discovered a button. And once they know where the button is, they do not need physical power to influence you. They only need to press it. Think about the person who knows that you cannot tolerate being ignored. They become distant, and immediately you pursue them. They know that silence will make you uncomfortable, so they use silence whenever they want your attention. Or consider someone who knows you cannot stand being criticized. They make one small remark, and suddenly you are spending 10 minutes explaining yourself. You believe you are defending your dignity. They may simply be controlling your behavior. The solution is not to become emotionless. No human being can eliminate emotion, and trying to do so often creates another form of weakness. The real skill is learning to create a pause between what happens and what you do about it. Someone says something insulting. Pause. Someone does not respond. Pause. Someone suddenly changes their behavior toward you. Pause. Do not immediately ask, "What should I do?" First ask, "What is happening here?" That single question moves you from reaction to observation. And observation gives you options. When you react immediately, the other person controls the tempo. They create the situation, and you respond according to their timing. But when you slow yourself down, you regain the ability to choose. You may decide that the comment deserves an answer. You may decide that it does not. You may realize that the person is trying to provoke you. You may realize that they are simply having a bad day. You may discover that the situation is not important enough to deserve your energy at all. The important thing is that the decision becomes yours. This is where ignoring can become a form of self-protection rather than a social game. You are not ignoring someone because you want to make them suffer. You are refusing to give automatic access to your emotional energy. Not every person deserves a reaction. Not every accusation deserves an explanation. Not every insult deserves a defense. Not every person who walks away deserves to be chased. The moment you understand this, your behavior becomes harder to predict. And when people cannot easily predict your emotional reactions, they cannot easily manipulate them. There is another consequence. You begin to respect yourself more. Every time you resist the urge to chase someone who is deliberately withholding attention, you teach yourself that you can survive uncertainty. Every time you remain calm when someone tries to provoke you, you strengthen your ability to govern yourself. Every time you refuse to explain yourself endlessly, you remind yourself that your worth does not depend on winning another person's approval. This internal change eventually becomes visible externally. People notice when someone is no longer desperate for a response. They notice when an insult produces observation instead of anger. They notice when rejection produces acceptance instead of begging. They notice when distance produces distance rather than pursuit. And sometimes this changes how they treat you, not because you have threatened them, but because they realize their usual methods no longer produce the same results. The person who once knew exactly how to get your attention now has to approach you differently. The person who once controlled your emotions through silence discovers that you can tolerate silence. The person who once expected you to chase them discovers that you can walk away. This is a quiet form of power because it does not require confrontation. You simply become unavailable to manipulation. But there is one final danger. Do not turn this principle into paranoia. Not every action contains a hidden strategy. Not everyone is trying to control you. If you interpret every silence as manipulation, you will become suspicious rather than powerful. Observe first. Interpret later. Rot rack only when necessary. That is the discipline, because the strongest person in the room is not always the one who controls everyone else. Sometimes it is the person who has mastered the far more difficult task of controlling himself. When your attention can no longer be purchased by provocation, your emotions can no longer be easily pulled by another person's behavior, and your need for approval no longer dictates your decisions, you become difficult to manipulate, and that quiet independence is one of the most attractive forms of power you can possess. Constant presence has a strange effect on human perception. When someone is always available, always responding, always appearing at the same moment you expect them, their presence can gradually become part of the background. You may still appreciate them, but your mind no longer pays the same attention to what it has learned to expect. Familiarity creates comfort, but excessive familiarity can also make value invisible. Then something changes. The person who is always there becomes less available. They are not angry. They do not announce their departure. They simply stop appearing everywhere. They stop initiating every conversation. They stop responding to every small request. They become occupied with their own life, and suddenly their absence becomes noticeable. This is the psychology of contrast. We often understand the value of something more clearly when we experience its opposite. You do not fully understand how loud a room was until it becomes silent. You do not notice how frequently someone contacted you until the messages stop. You do not always recognize the comfort of someone's presence until that presence is no longer guaranteed. This is why absence can sometimes create attraction, not because disappearing is a magical technique, but because absence changes perception. When someone is constantly present, there is no urgency to think about them. You assume they will be there tomorrow. You assume they will answer. You assume they will return. Their attention becomes predictable. But when that pattern breaks, the mind notices, where are they? What are they doing? Why have they become quieter? Did something change? The person who previously received your attention without effort is now confronted with its absence. And that absence creates contrast with everything they had previously taken for granted. But there is a deeper psychological principle here. People do not simply evaluate what they have, they evaluate what they might lose. The possibility of loss can make people pay closer attention to something they previously treated casually. This is why someone may suddenly become more interested when they realize that your attention is not permanent. Not because you threaten to leave, but because they finally understand that your presence is a choice. That distinction matters. If you are always available, regardless of how someone treats you, your availability communicates that there are no consequences to neglecting you. But when you quietly step back from situations where your effort is not being returned, you create a natural boundary. You are saying without words, my presence is not automatic. This can change the entire dynamic. Suppose you are always the person who starts the conversation. You ask the questions. You keep the interaction alive. You make the plans. You repair every awkward moment. Eventually, the other person may become passive because you have taken responsibility for maintaining the connection, but stop doing everything. Do not punish them. Do not become rude. Simply stop carrying the entire relationship by yourself. Now something revealing happens. Either they move toward you or they do not. If they move toward you, you discover that there was genuine interest beneath the old pattern. If they do nothing, you discover something equally valuable. Perhaps you were carrying a connection that was never truly balanced. Absence, therefore, does more than create attraction. It reveals reality. This is why the strongest form of absence is not theatrical. It does not involve posting pictures to make someone jealous, deliberately ignoring messages for calculated periods, or creating fake mystery. Those actions keep your attention focused on the person you supposedly want to forget. Real absence happens naturally when your attention returns to your own life. You become busy with meaningful goals. You spend time developing your abilities. You build relationships that are reciprocal. You stop checking constantly to see who noticed you. You stop measuring your worth by how quickly someone responds. And when you do this, your absence becomes authentic. You are not pretending to be unavailable. You simply have a life that does not require constant social confirmation. That is what creates the strongest contrast. When someone sees that you can enjoy yourself without their attention, they may begin to understand that your interest in them was never desperation. It was a choice. And choice is powerful. There is something psychologically compelling about a person who can leave without creating chaos. They do not threaten, they do not beg, they do not demand recognition. They simply withdraw their energy from what no longer deserves it. This makes their presence more meaningful because it is no longer guaranteed. But there is an important warning. Never create absence merely to manufacture attraction. If you constantly disappear and return just to keep someone emotionally uncertain, you are not demonstrating strength. You are creating instability. Eventually, people recognize the pattern, and what once looked mysterious begins to look manipulative. The goal is not to make people afraid of losing you. The goal is to become someone who does not fear losing what is not genuinely reciprocal. That is the difference between strategy and self-respect. When you understand this, you stop trying to make yourself constantly visible. You no longer feel compelled to prove that you are interesting. You allow your presence to breathe. You allow people to experience your absence, and you allow their response or lack of response to tell you something about the connection, because sometimes you become more noticeable, not by demanding attention, but by quietly removing yourself from the places where your presence has been taken for granted. Your absence should never be a performance. It should be the natural consequence of knowing where your presence truly belongs. The deepest form of attraction begins when you stop needing to be chosen. Most people approach relationships, friendships, and social situations with an invisible question running through their minds. Do they like me? Do they want me? Do they approve of me? What can I do to make them stay? And without realizing it, they hand another person the authority to determine their emotional state. The moment your sense of worth depends on someone else's attention, you become vulnerable to their behavior. If they respond warmly, you feel powerful. If they become distant, you feel rejected. If they praise you, your confidence rises. If they ignore you, you begin questioning yourself. Your emotional state becomes a reflection of someone else's decisions, and this is exactly what you must escape. There is a different way to move through the world. Instead of asking, how can I make this person choose me? Ask, do I even want this person in my life? That question changes everything. Suddenly you are no longer standing outside someone else's door asking for permission to enter. You are standing at your own door, deciding who deserves access. This is not arrogance, it is self-possession. A person who knows their own value does not need to convince everyone of it. They understand that attraction cannot be forced. Respect cannot be begged for. Genuine interest cannot be manufactured through endless effort. You can present your best qualities, communicate clearly, and show genuine interest, but after that, the other person's response belongs to them. If they choose you, good. If they do not, you continue. This ability to continue is what separates emotional strength from emotional dependence. Think about what happens when someone senses that you are terrified of losing them. Even if you never say it aloud, your behavior reveals it. You tolerate things you normally would not tolerate. You respond immediately, even when you are busy. You forgive disrespect without requiring change. You chase after someone who repeatedly withdraws. You become willing to abandon your own standards simply to keep the connection alive. And slowly, you lose the very quality that made you attractive in the first place. Your independence, the irony, is brutal. You try so hard to keep someone that you become less desirable to them. You become so focused on being chosen that you stop being someone who chooses. Real attraction begins to return when you reverse that pattern. You build your life first. Your goals matter. Your time matters. Your peace matters. Your standards matter. Your attention matters. Someone can become an important part of your life without becoming the owner of it. That distinction is crucial. When you have your own direction, another person's attention becomes an addition rather than a necessity. Their presence can make your life richer, but their absence does not destroy the foundation you have built. And people can feel that difference. There is a certain calmness in someone who does not need to win every person they meet. They are not constantly performing. They are not trying to impress everyone in the room. They are not watching for approval after every sentence. They can be rejected without becoming bitter. They can be admired without becoming arrogant. They can be ignored without becoming desperate. They can walk away without creating a scene. This emotional balance creates something more powerful than forced mystery. Credibility. When you say you value yourself, people may doubt you. When your behavior consistently demonstrates it, they have nothing to argue with. This is also why the previous principles matter. Selective attention, silence, emotional control, and healthy absence all point toward the same destination. You are not learning how to manipulate people. You are learning how to stop being manipulated by your own need for them. That is the deeper lesson. If someone ignores you, you do not need to immediately punish them with silence. You simply observe. If someone walks away, you do not need to chase them. You allow their decision to stand. If someone does not recognize your value, you do not spend months presenting evidence. You move not because you never cared, because caring does not require surrendering your dignity. And when you reach this point, something unexpected happens. Your attention becomes more attractive precisely because it is no longer desperate. When you give someone your time, they know it is a choice. When you listen, they know you could be doing something else. When you stay, they know you are staying because you want to, not because you are afraid to leave. That is a completely different psychological experience. People are naturally more careful with what they believe they could lose. But the goal should never be to make someone afraid of losing you. The goal is to become so grounded in yourself that you are no longer afraid of losing someone who does not value you. That is the final transformation. You stop asking, how do I become attractive enough for them to choose me? You begin asking, does this connection deserve the person I am becoming? And once you genuinely live by that question, your behavior changes without effort. You stop chasing. You stop overexplaining. You stop giving unlimited attention. You stop treating rejection as a verdict on your worth. You become selective. You become calm. You become difficult to control. And most importantly, you become free. Because the most attractive person is not the one who makes everyone chase them. It is the person who no longer needs to be chased, chosen, or validated to know their own worth.